So we've got a few people joining us already. Welcome. Exciting to see you here. We're going to start in a couple of minutes, but before we do that, we thought we'd just launch a little poll to see where people are calling in from. Here we go. So yeah, we're interested in to see where you're all calling in from, if different states in Australia or maybe somewhere else. Awesome. So we got a few Queenslanders, New South Wales, Victoria as well. Awesome. We'll leave this up for a while as people are popping in. So there's a lot of Queenslanders. So as you can see, you'll be able to write in the chat and also ask us questions. So everyone, if you feel like it, you can write which town you're from in the chat.
Looks like the numbers in Victoria are increasing and tying with Queensland.
Oh yeah.
Good to see the Melbourneites getting on the call. Hopefully everyone's coping well in the lockdown. It seems they're easing and the numbers are coming down. So hopefully they'll ease even more over the next week or so. So hang in there, Victorians, Melbourneites specifically. What are the numbers, Anna, for rough percentages of Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria?
So right now it sits on Queensland 61%, New South Wales 9%, and Victoria 30%. So it's those three states. We've got 14 people from Queensland, 2 people New South Wales, and 8 people Victoria.
Nice one. We're going to just hang on for a few more minutes just to allow most of our attendees to get on. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah, let's do half a minute more and then I'll end the poll. Awesome. Okay. Here we go. And I'll share the results here. So, yep, Queensland, 16 people, welcome. New South Wales, 2 people, welcome to you as well. And Victoria, 8 people. Yeah, super welcome to you all. Exciting to have you here.
Okay, so we'll get started, Anna?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and giving up your valuable time to attend our session today. Mark Alexander is my name. I'm one of the directors at Aginic. I head up the Melbourne office, and we will be talking about leveraging design thinking in your analytics projects and driving the ROI and the engagement and basically the success of the project. So next slide, please, Pete. I'll start off with a brief introduction of Aginic, and then I'll throw over to Anna and Pietara, as you can see on your screens, and they'll take you through the session today, our design experts within Aginic, and then David Hodges, our Sydney director, will finish off the call with Q&A and do the closing. So next slide, please, Pete. So a brief introduction. Next slide, thanks, Pete. We were founded 6 years ago by Brett and Marty out of Brisbane, and since then we've been growing significantly with now over 80 people. We've got offices in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and we work internationally. Projects in WA, NT, South Australia, ACT. Now, Aginic, a lot of people ask, how do you pronounce it and what does it stand for? It's short for Agile Analytics, so Aginic. And Brett and Marty started the company because they wanted to do analytics differently. And we solve problems differently by bringing that agile approach, and design thinking is a key component of that, which we'll obviously touch on today. We worked in both the enterprise and as well as the small to medium enterprise end of town, and some of our clients, past clients, have included Coles, BHP, Rio, Flight Centre, a lot of federal government departments, as well as a number of state departments, state government departments as well. Industries, we specialise in health, education, public sector. We've done a lot of work in mining and travel and a number of other sectors as well. So next slide, please, Pete. So this encapsulates what we do, and our vision is we solve business problems differently, and data and analytics and visualization is at our core. That's our DNA, started 6 years ago. Data science and advanced analytics is a key capability of ours that we also deploy to solve our business problems. We've got data engineers, so we have a deep cloud technology expertise that enables us to solve problems right from the source. They're building data platforms for our clients all the way through to the business analytics and the visualization to enable our clients to solve their business problems effectively. We have design and agile, and we'll be talking to design today, so I'm not going to dive into that deeply, but design and agile is a way of working, and we work in multidisciplinary teams. As you can see, analysts, agile delivery, engineers, designers, cloud architects, directors overseeing the projects. And that we deploy these multidisciplinary teams on our client projects to bring that a multifaceted approach, which it's one of our key differentiators. As you'll see on our next slide, our secret sauce is that agile and design thinking way of working that no other consultancy in data and analytics in this country brings those two together with the analytics and the engineering to help solve our clients' problems the most effectively. So why design thinking and analytics and this whole session is because design is so critical to the way we work, and it's not just on almost every one of our client projects, but it's also internally. We live and breathe it, and one internal project, case in point, is our data strategy self-assessment survey, which we've almost finished, and it'll be on our website, and we'll be able to deploy to our current clients and obviously prospective clients. And design was a part of that project right from the start, looking at what problem we're trying to solve internally, how we're going to effectively and efficiently get to success, and what does success look like. And design was a key component of that project all the way through, and we've almost finished that. So we'll communicate with all of you when that's complete. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Pietari and Anna to run through today's session. I really hope you enjoy it. Our goal is at the end of this, you have a deeper understanding of what design is and how design can really be utilized in data and analytics projects to maximize the chance of success and really solving your problems, and obviously helps us help our clients to solve their problems. So over to you, Pietari and Anna, and David Hodges will close out the session today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome everyone. My name is Pietari, and I'm the head of design ops at Aginic.
Hey, my name is Anna, and I work as a creative lead at Aginic. And yeah, let's get into talking about design.
So yeah, today's topic is design ROI in data analytics projects. So it's a broad topic. So today we're going to be focusing on, first of all, what is design? what kind of design methodologies we use, what's the role of a designer in all of this, and then we'll also walk you through one of our design approaches and one of kind of our case studies. And as Anna said, we'll have the Q&A module open all the time. So if you have any questions, please just ask them as we go. We'll try to answer them either throughout the session, or then we also have more formal Q&A module in the end. But before we dive into the topic, let's get a bit of interaction going.
Yes, we want to start with doing a quick poll. So before I launch this poll, I just want to explain what you're looking at right now on the screen. So this is called the Design Ladder. And this is a tool that was developed by the Danish Design Center in 2001. And it's a tool that can help you evaluate your organization's design maturity. So the concept behind this is that there is a positive link between high earnings and using design in your business strategy. So before I launch the poll, I'll just go through the 4 steps quickly. So level 1, that's where you don't really use design in your organization, not systematically, maybe now and then, but not really that much. Level 2, then you use design as form giving. So it's used as finish or styling in new products or services. So it's a visual way of using design. Level 3, then you use design as a process, and it's an integrated element in your business, and you also think about what users need and have that baked into your process. And level 4, then you're starting using design as strategy. Then you have design blended in your business strategy, and always think about that as you move forward with your vision. So let's launch the poll. Here we go. You should see it now. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a think and respond, and we'll see how we go. And after this poll, I'll tell you a little bit about what Aginic's journey was like, going through the different steps.
And whilst we're waiting, apologies, I missed one thing in our introduction around Pietari and Anna and our design team. They're actually considered experts in their field. They're writing books, writing chapters in books, speaking at conferences. So yeah, we're very lucky to have such a high quality design team. And it's one thing around our culture and our way of doing things at Aginic is we really seek the best talent in the country, and we're really protective of our culture and way of working at Aginic. So you're in great hands today with Pietari and Anna, and I actually have to jump off the call, so I'm going to say goodbye. I'm actually on holidays on the road with my family, so I'll leave you in capable hands, and Hodge will finish up. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
And also for the late joiners, the first session, the first 5 minutes was about Aginic, and this meeting is recorded. So if you want to go through that stuff later on, you'll get this recording probably early next week.
Yes, and we're just running, for anyone who's joined just recently, we're just running a poll with a question that could help you evaluate or think about your organization's design maturity. And I think there's a few questions here in the chat asking about definition of design, because it seems like a vague and ambiguous term. Everything is designed to some extent, and that's very true. And we're going to go into this in more detail in this session, because you can look at things as just, visual styling and artwork. But then there's also another layer of design which talks about experience design, and also another concept called design thinking, which is about creative problem solving. So we're going to talk about that throughout this session. So if you're not really sure you might be either a 1 or a 2. But we'll go through it, during this session. Is there anything you want to add to that, Pietari?
Not at this stage, yeah. It's a broad topic, and we'll try our best to unpack all of that today.
I'll end the poll now, and I'll share the results. So here we go. So there's a few people that see themselves at level 1, and the biggest amount of people, 46%, feel like they're on a level 2, which is more thinking about the visual styling. And then we have a few people, 21% on level 3, which is exciting. And we got 7%, so 2 people on level 4, which is also very exciting. So if we go to the next slide, Pete. So here's a concept that I like to call the design gap when you look at the design ladder. And often between the step 2 and 3, it can feel like the hardest to take that step and get there. You can get stuck on the design as form giving. And when we look at like Aginic's journey, when Aginic was founded in 2014 and through to 16, it was probably somewhere between a 1 and 2. And then in 2016, they hired their first designer, which was me. And for a while, probably between 2016 and 18, we were going a little bit between 2 and 3. And there was a lot of focus on visual styling for dashboards and data analytics. But we also were experimenting with ways on how we can create really useful things for users and how we can make sure that designers are part of the journey in projects. But that took a bit of tweaking and experimenting. So in 2018 to 19, that's when we started really feeling like, okay, we're a really strong 3. We have this, we are using designers early in the process of a project and making sure we're learning about users. And we're starting to grow and growing a design team. So being a few more people, so around 5 designers at that point. And from late 2019 to now 2020, we have reached that level 4 and we're still growing and on that journey to become better.
Awesome. So that brings us to then talking about the value of design. So what kind of benefits and rewards can you get out of design, especially if design is built in process inside your business? And obviously there's more, but today we're going to focus on what we selected as the top 3. And the first being design builds better products and processes. So nowadays technology is so advanced that usually building an application can be quite quick and even a simple process. And if you think about, for instance, App Store, it's quite saturated. There's a ton of apps that do the same thing. So this is where design comes into play, because you need to have something that differentiates you from the rest. And that's usually having that great customer experience. And it's not just single products. It's more than that. So what design does is it looks the holistic process. So instead of just focusing on single products, it looks at the processes holistically and make them better to then have that better customer experience throughout different touch points. And today we're going to talk about some of the design methodologies that address these kind of service journeys, because it's really crucial, because once you start to improve the process, it doesn't just impact the external clients, your end customers, but it also can have a massive impact on your internal business processes. And today we're going to focus on running through one of our kind of boilerplate things that we run in client projects that leads to building better products.
Awesome. Yeah, design it can be such a useful tool for reducing risk. So say if you need to make big changes at the end of a project, or if you realize you made some mistakes, that could be a very costly costly mistake or costly big change towards the end. So what design helps us do is failing early, which is a good thing. It means that if you can start understanding users, designing some quick prototypes that can be tested and feel like the real thing, means that you can get good feedback from users and iterate. And then before you actually start building the real thing, you know you're on the right track.
Awesome. And as said, it's not just doing that iteration, the trial, the prototype in the start, but it's also throughout the project life cycle. So keeping the users engaged and making sure that you validate throughout the project that what we're building is something that what the end users want. And then the third is design can increase the bottom line. And this comes through attractiveness of products and services, which means that you can position not just your products, but your company as a premium against the competition. So great products usually translate to great brand experience, which then builds brand credibility. It has a lot of direct effects, such as productivity. You streamline the processes, and that means that you can go to market quicker. You validate that your product has market fit, as well as some indirect effects, such as having a design as a function, streamlined processes can lead up to having a happier workplace, which again then boosts your company value. And there's another way to kind of look at the business value. So this diagram here is based on a research that was conducted by a company called Envision. And they interviewed 2,200 companies in 77 countries, so around the globe in different industries, to figure out where their designers are positioned in the business and what kind of rewards it brings. So on the y-axis, you see that reflects more benefits from the design. And on the x-axis, you see more adaptation of design. And if we start from the bottom, so the first tier, level 1, is where designers are positioned as producers. And this was 41% of the companies. And this means that producers are really focused on the product level. So they're output driven. So they might just enhance the existing applications, which then leads up to increased product usability. The next level would be, this was roughly 21%. And this is where designers their role was connectors. So they work on the products, but they really interact with the non-design peers. So they work with the team, and based on this, it leads to increased customer satisfaction. Similar amount of companies recognized that their designers were considered as architects, same 21%, so level 3. And this starts to be the level where design is a planned operation. So they have that role in the company with specific tasks that they do, so they have ownership and also accountability. And this then can translate to increased revenue. Level 4 is where designers are considered as scientists. And at this stage, they start to rely on data more. So the design is data driven. The design choices are based on research. And the outputs from this kind of level of maturity is that you start to get those project specific savings, cost savings, and time to market is usually quicker. And on the tippity top, we have level 5, 5% of the companies, where designers are visionaries. So this is when design is involved in the company at strategic level. So they bring in the innovation, they really shape your core services, and this can lead up to having design patents, as well as then increasing the share price of the company. So if those are then the benefits, what should be the role of the designer? And this depends on the industry and the projects that you work in. At Aginic, we work across multiple different industries. We work with health, work with retail, all kinds of different industries. So most of our designers are digital designers. They come from different backgrounds, so they might have a degree in business or accounting or anything. And we try to utilize that background in the daily activities. Our designer role is strategic. And what I mean by that is that they are embedded in the projects early on. They need to understand the business problem. They're part of the problem framing, so they can then come up with realistic solutions to the problem. So it's really key for us that we position the designers to be part of the project throughout the project life cycle, so they can really then bring in the benefits from the projects.
So the different activities a designer does, like with working with us in our team at Aginic, there's so many things. So I think the main thing to bring up here is that as designers, we work closely with other people and make sure that we understand the clients we work with and users that we are designing for. So there are lots of different activities, like doing workshopping closely with clients. So when we work with clients and other people, we work as one team. So when we do workshops like brainstorming or anything like that, we do it all together. And it could either be in person or remotely. So we do things like prototyping and sketching, wireframing, engaging with both stakeholders and users, and we conduct user testing and surveying. So there's a lot of things outside of just, sitting in a dungeon somewhere and just creating designs on a computer. There's so many more things outside of that that's included in our designer roles.
And that brings me to one of my favorite topics. So positioning the design correctly. So to reap the rewards, you need to position it correctly. And if we look back at the diagram that you saw earlier, which is our strategic service diagram, you see that design and agile are positioned in the outer edge. So they're kind of the cross that holds everything together. Together, they run this iterative process. So they start with the project and they end with the project. They go throughout the project life cycle. Inside that, then we have the holistic data strategy. Usually the cloud tech acts as a foundation, and deep in the core, we have the core. How Aginic started was with data analytics, and also we've expanded our services into data science. This is a quote from IBM, which goes, "Design is everyone's job. Not everyone is a designer, but everybody has to have the user as the North Star." And this is kind of our mindset inside Aginic. It's never been about headcount. Even though our design team is growing, it's almost doubled from the past year. It hasn't been the target. We're trying to get adaptation company-wide. So we want everyone to utilize these skills, such as design thinking, and really thinking about the end user. So it's all about upskilling the company. So that's the way to kind of climb that design ladder. So our evolution is kind of based on horizontal adaptation.
So yeah, let's get into talking about our design approach at Aginic. So we have a very holistic design approach, and our focus is on experience design. So as you can see on this illustration here, we are mentioning a few different, areas of design. The first one being the smallest, and that's UX, or user experience design. And then as we go a little bit further out in scope, we go to, you can say on that big illustration, Pete. Yeah, that's great, thanks. And then as you go out a bit in scope, then there's something that you can call customer experience design or CX design. And then as you go even further out, a much more bigger holistic bubble, there's something that's called service design. And something that we apply to all of these areas is something that's called design thinking. And that's a process for creative problem solving with always having the user in mind. And I'll talk about that a bit later. So let's go to the next slide, please. So yeah, so as I was saying, so user experience, I guess, is the smallest bubble of these three. And this focuses on the experience a user receives when interacting with that product. And comparing that to customer experience, it's a bit different. So customer experience is a bit broader. So then it's focusing on a person's experience with an organization or company at all the different touch points. So there are lots of different touch points, like different products, people that you interact with, websites, social media. It could be all kinds of different channels. But
and
I wanted
then
to say just one thing, Pete. So another thing I want to say about customer experience is that some people might get confused with the term customer experience, but what's important to understand is that there's still a focus on a user, and it doesn't always have to be about the customer purchasing something. It could be other types of experiences, like an employee's experience within a company or something like that.
Thanks. And then what looks like holistic overall, all of this, so it looks over UX, it looks over CX, EX, is service design. So service design addresses how organization gets something done. So its aim is to design frictionless and cohesive end-to-end services from the customer point of view. And the customer can be internal or external. And the way we like to kind of explain what service design is we use this little diagram here, which is a theater. So inside a theater, if you think about a play, you have the audience. So the audience is then the customer. On the front stage, you have the play happening. You have certain props that are attached to that. And then you have the backstage, is where, you know, the important business stuff happens. That's not directly seen by the audience, but it's felt. So for instance, if you think about backstage, they're trying to open up the curtains, but for some reason they don't open. That's directly felt from the audience, and it's impacting then the front stage. So in service design, we try to look at all these individual service journeys and identify any touch points where there is friction that we can then try to improve. And to improve usually leads to a distinguished brand experience, as well as maximizing the business potential.
Okay, so I mentioned design thinking a bit earlier, that's something, it's more of a mindset that we apply to everything we do. So it's, and yeah, here you can see that illustration again. So design thinking is something that both designers, but also everyone else within Aginic is something that we use. And design thinking is a process for creative problem solving and always thinking about the user and designing solutions for the end user. And it's a very human-centered mindset. So as you think about the end user in mind, when it comes to design thinking, there's 5 different common phases that you go through. And the first one is called empathize. So this is where you start learning as much as you can about users, the people that you're actually designing solutions for. So it's doing a lot of research, meeting users, interviewing them, doing workshops to try to understand them a bit more. And the step that comes after that is called define. And that's where you're trying to define a common goal, but also defining the real problem. And the step after that is ideate, or what we like to call it is brainstorming. So this is where you try to come up with lots and lots and lots of crazy solutions, ideas, and see where it can take you. And from there, you narrow down to 1 or 2 concepts that you like, and you start prototyping. And a prototype could be a very, very low fidelity prototype, like a drawing on a piece of paper, or it could be high fidelity where you're creating something that looks and feels like the real thing. Like it could be an app that you can click through, but it feels like the real thing, but it's not. It's designed to be interactive. And that's the way we do things at Aginic. We often do those high fidelity prototypes before we build the real thing. And after that, we want to test with real users and gather a lot of feedback so we then can iterate and make sure the prototype is as close as possible to what we want to build. And it's important to mention that this process is very iterative. So you don't always go from left to right. It could be a little bit back and forth depending on the project and depending on user needs or when you can do certain things. Often we start projects by defining a common goal, and then we start empathizing. So we can jump a little bit back and forth depending on what works for you.
So then how does all this design that we talked about, how does this get applied to a data analytics project? So we have a lot of different services, design services that we use throughout the projects, but there's one specific that we usually try to include in every single one of our data analytics projects. And that is called BI Design Workshop. And this is what this is. It's really creative and user-centric workshop that kind of follows the 5 steps of design thinking. And usually we run this a half-a-day workshop, so it's really rapid. And in this session, which can be done in person or remotely, we involve people from the client side and also from our side, Aginic. From the client side, we always want to have a product owner or a product manager or a sponsor, someone who can make the decisions on the spot. We also want to have a handful of different SMEs. Maybe they are business analysts that know that what kind of data is available, or engineers that can talk more in detail about the data. From Aginic's side, we usually have a designer, probably a delivery lead, and then also our technical experts that then we can do those decisions on the spot. But what's most crucial is that we want to have the end users in the room. And these are the users. So for instance, if we're building a dashboard, we want to have those users in the room that are either currently using the dashboard that we're going to be replacing, or the people who are brainstorming for the new one. And as you see, it's kind of 5 steps similar to design thinking. So it starts with defining a common goal. So as a group, we define, all right, what's the challenge we're going to solve, and what's kind of the goal for this project? And after that, we have different range of experiments that we run, but the key is to define the user group. So we want to learn about the users. We want to understand their pain points, their needs, and their jobs. After that, we usually do some kind of journey mapping, and this goes into more detail about the user needs. So we really think about their workflows and processes and any touch points where we can, again, reduce that friction. After that comes the most interesting part for many, is creative sketching. So this workshop doesn't utilize any kind of tech gizmos. We don't use computers usually, apart from enabling the remote setting. But we try to use pen and papers and whiteboards and actual sketching. So in the sketching bit, we sketch out any solutions that we could utilize in this project. And based on those sketches, usually we do some sort of voting, and then the decision maker kind of pulls the trigger and decides that these are the features that we want to include in the first prototype. And those features then get documented in a storyboard. So those could be like documents that show that, all right, these are the features that we want to include in the screen. Sometimes they go into really detailed, such as thinking about, we want these metrics, we want to display them in this kind of visualization, or sometimes it's higher level. And this is where the workshop ends. And after that, Aginic goes back to the office, and then we start to instantly prototype. So we use different tools and different fidelities to prototype a solution that is then, after the workshop, played back to the stakeholder group, as well as tested with the end users for further feedback. So today we have one example case study. It's based on a fictional client with a fictional need. And the reason for this is that we wanted to showcase everything without needing to steer away from any sensitive data or anything. But it's really closely aligned with the business challenges that often our clients meet. And it's going through the real processes and exercises that we do in real client projects. So today's case study client is Greenfield University, which is an Australian university looking to uplift their current analytics landscape to become more data-driven company. And this is where we're going to switch from Google Slides to one of our favorite tools that Anna can explain a bit more about.
Yes, exciting. So the approach we take when we run workshops, we either do them in person or remotely. But I guess recently in 2020, most of them have been remotely. And the tool that we use is called Miro. And what we do in our workshops, there's a lot of sticky notes, there's a lot of sketching and drawing that you could either draw straight in Miro, or you can create drawings at home and then take photos and upload. You can upload PDFs and share. There's a lot of cool things you can do. And I'll just add a little post-it here to demonstrate. Hello. Hello, everybody. Awesome. So this is, and Pete is saying hi back. Hello, Pete. That's awesome. So it's a very collaborative way of doing workshopping online, and it's very exciting, and it works really well. It works almost as well as when you're doing this in person with real sticky notes. And so what I want to start talking about here on the Miro whiteboard is what we usually start with when we do workshops with clients. And that's talking about a high level goal or a common goal, setting a common goal. And for this mock-up example, Greenfield University, the high level goal that we set in the first workshop was that they would like timely and automated reporting of trusted data across the university. So, you know, when you first start engaging with a client and we start, you know, forming a team, it's really good to set a high level common goal to start with. And then as you start doing more research and understanding users, you can pinpoint problems and become more specific. So something we do also during either the first or second workshop or session, because online sessions are broken down a little bit more than when we do in-person session. The BI workshop, we can do it in a half-day in-person session, or when we do it in online workshops, it's either 2 or 3 separate sessions, because you get a little bit more tired when you're in long sessions online. So another thing that we do is something we call user mapping. And that includes creating user profiles, but also doing user journey maps to understand users more. And what we call user profiles is our take on an empathy map. And an empathy map is part of it's one tool out of the design thinking toolkit. And this is where you try to empathize with users and try to understand and put yourself in their shoes and see how you see what problems they might have or needs that they might have. So the way we created these user profiles they've been, I guess, changed up a little bit, so they work more for specific workplace roles. So it's easier to talk about a specific person in a specific role.
Awesome. So yeah, as you see, this is one of the 3 user groups that we have in this example. And even though you have a face and a name, they're not real people. So these personas are always fictional, but they represent the needs of that specific user group. So here, for instance, we have Miriam, who is the Vice Chancellor, so represents the executives group. And the things that we really want to identify are their jobs, their goals. So jobs meaning what they do daily, what their activities are, goals, what they're trying to achieve, the needs that they need to perform those jobs, and then pain points, what's currently causing friction in their journey. So if we go through Miriam, and I might just read a couple of these post-its. So as jobs, Miriam provides academic and administrative leadership, carries out ceremonial and civic duties. Her goals are steering the university in the right direction and be informed about what's important. The needs are a high-level overview of the university, timely and analytical insights into the university's performance. So currently missing that to draw those conclusions. So probably based on gut feel. Trustworthy, consistent data to back her decision making, kind of similar thing. And then the pain points are, I keep getting different pictures of how the university is tracking, depending on which department submitted the report. It makes me question whose data is correct. So there's issues with the data quality. I can't make decisions if I can't trust the data, what I'm seeing. More often than not, the reports I receive have out-of-date date. So the data is not timely. And then we also create a couple other ones. Usually the amount of user groups is always ranging. Sometimes it's a small number of people, but in one of the recent projects, I think we had 31 user groups, some of them internal, some of them external. So then you really need to think about that you cater the solution for different ones. So we also have Abby representing the directors group. Her role is academic planning and performance. And then Rachel, who's part of the BA team, so represents the analyst group. And from this, usually getting out this information, and we usually store these either in Miro, or if we're working on a, for instance, client site, we might have these on the wall that we always can reflect that, wait a minute, is this solution actually addressing Rachel's problems? So it's really good to have it visible and kind of always in the mind, because they are representing the end user. So after this, we kind of identified the key pain points, which were the data is always out of date by the time the reports are ready. It's difficult to see the university's performance as a whole. Reports are very manual and time-consuming to produce, so missing automation. Most of my time is spent stitching together data to make it useful. There's little to no time left for analysis, and this is usually where the modern technologies can help lots of businesses that can automate those manual processes. I have so many different reports from different departments, all telling me different things. I don't know which report to trust. So these were, for this specific project, kind of the key pain points that we focused on solving.
So after finding out lots and lots of pain points, this is where we start to flip it around and frame the problems in a different way. So this is where we turn pain points into questions, because that could actually make it more feel like there's an opportunity to solve something. Instead of focusing on a problem, you create an open-ended question. So that will suggest that a solution is possible. And that's really important when you're going into the brainstorming stage. So what we did here is that we did a few different what's called how might we statements. So that's when you turn a pain point into a question. So one example is how might we create faster reporting processes? And from all of these pain points, one was selected that we would focus on for the prototype. And that one was, how might we create an easy to understand overview of our university information? So this is what, in the initial workshop, what the client thought, this is the first thing that we want to, create and start building. Something that has this holistic, easy to understand overview for most users. So that's what we had in mind when we started brainstorming. And brainstorming is the really fun part. So what we usually start doing when we brainstorm, especially with people who aren't really used to it, is that we let people just write down on Post-its or on a piece of paper any ideas or any concerns or thoughts or any kind of solutions that they might already have thought of. And then from there, and we only do that for a couple of minutes, quantity is better than quality at this point. And after that, then we get like maybe 20 minutes or half an hour to actually sit and sketch. And you do this individually. You sit and sketch all your ideas and try to create a visual view of it. And everyone can draw. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to convey the message. So this is usually a really fun process. And people realize that they can, visualize more than they usually thought. And from here, you actually start voting. So everyone presents their ideas to each other in the team. And then from there, you do dot voting. And that's putting sticky dots on your favorites. So it kind of turns into heat mapping. What ideas do we actually want to move forward with? And you move them along to the storyboarding session. And this is where you do joint storyboarding. So you actually create wireframes together as a team. And here we created two different wireframes, a wireframe for a login page and a wireframe for a student overview.
Awesome. And this is usually like if we have the workshop in person, this is where we kind of cut off. And this is where Aginic takes these storyboards that are validated with the work group. And then we start to produce a prototype. We use different kind of tools, but one of our favorite tools is called Figma, which is a design program where you can produce either like low fidelity quick wireframes up to like production ready user interfaces. And what's great thing about it is it's cloud-based, it's highly accessible, it works in browser or a native application. So it's really time saving for us that we can just send a link to the client or the end user and just have a look at the prototype. Because it's cloud-based means that our designers can always access the file. They can be working on the file together. Our rest of the group, so analysts can jump in. It can be used further on in the build stage. But even when we're just fleshing out the prototype, it can be this collaborative process. You don't need to send new versions of files. Everything's tracked in one piece of software. So jumping on, so I'm going to switch tabs here. And this is then the prototype. So this is the first iteration of the prototype. And as you saw in the storyboard, one of the screens that we wanted to mock up was the login screen, which is represented here. And then also we mocked up the kind of overview screen. So as I said, you can build prototypes. You can build for different devices. You could do one for mobile. But in this case, we started with the desktop approach. And if you click around, you see that, all right, there's hotspots. So you can create those interactive prototypes. So as a user, then I would click this, enter my names. So this simulates me entering these details into these fields. And after that, I can sign in. That then takes me to the GU dashboard. And this is the overview. And I see in the header that I'm looking at the data for all faculties. I have different switches for students, staff, and financial. On the top right, we have the filters, so the global filters. So I could change the faculty, year of filter by semester. You can do awesome stuff in Figma. You can do hover, so you can present that, all right, the users hovering this would get the actual numbers, so they wouldn't need to just rely on the line. Same for others. And then you can do movement throughout the screen. So we have fleshed out the student as well as the staff view, and then financials. And usually, like, we really think about the accessibility when we build dashboards. We're going to talk about that in a moment too, and that's the freebie that we're giving you in conjunction with this webinar. But for instance, we never just rely on color as an indicator. So here we have these arrows representing the trending. So whether these values have been trending up or down. And you see that red means that it's trending negatively. But we also want to use the arrows because due to, for instance, color blindness, we want to ensure that people understand the dashboards all in the similar way. Is there anything you want to add, Anna?
No, I think that sounds really good. You did bring up the not relying on color, which is great. When we think about the color schemes for these dashboards, often we try to consider, you know, the organization's brand color scheme and blend that in a little bit. But then we also make sure that we rely on dashboarding best practices when it comes to color use.
Sorry. Awesome. So then what happens after this prototype? We take it back to the stakeholder group, we play it back to the end users, and then we do it to get feedback. So usually the next step would be that we test with users. This can be either done in a face-to-face setting where we look at them using the solution in the prototype, or remotely we do screen sharing. We have a look like if they understand where to click, what to interact with, and usually they talk throughout this process. And then we have some questions that we always want to also ask during these user testing sessions. And we document these findings. So we're not just documenting for change, but we also want to record what went right. So users might say things like, all right, this feels like a GU tool. This will create some work for the IT team. I really like this. This is going to bring in value. This would be great to see on another screen. Will be interesting to see the split very clean. But there's also usually we want to record changes. So for instance, user might say that, actually, I want to see this also on the other screen. I don't want to flip back and forth. I want these things to be grouped together so I can compare the values. And usually this then leads up to a document, and we then do some amount of changes to the prototypes and keep engaging with the end users. So this is where we really kick off to kind of that iterative process. So we have a prototype, we test with users, validate, refine, and then go back until we're fully satisfied with the design approach. And the prototype doesn't die at that stage. It's going to be, used throughout the project lifecycle, because usually what we produce in Figma is something that's then used by our analysts to build these dashboards on the real tools. And back to the kind of the role of a designer in all of this, our designers need to know what's actually doable in these tools. So we don't want to produce a prototype that looks shiny, but couldn't be built on the tools. So they need to understand that. And we always, in this process, we also validate. So we engage with our internal team to make sure that, all right, can we do these kind of filters? Do we have the data to do these kind of trending indicators, for instance? So it's a process that involves the whole team.
I got a question from Vicky asking what the software was with the sticky notes. So that's called Miro. So if you just Google Miro, you'll be able to have a look. So it's a freemium tool. So you can use a few boards for free, but after that, you have to sign up as a team.
Awesome. So this was just one of the design examples. As I said, we have a lot of different services. We utilize design in different ways, but this was kind of the approach that we use in the BI design workshop. And we utilize design thinking in everything we do. It doesn't need to be a data analytics project. Sometimes we produce apps that are, for instance, measuring the digital capability of our organization. Has not so much to do with data or dashboarding, but we utilize the same mindset and the same process to avoid that risk and bring in the rewards. And kind of from everything we've talking about so far, we would love to talk about some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, so the first one, which we probably think is the most important one, is involving designers and end users in the process from the start. That will really make the project journey a lot easier, and it will reduce risk, but it also will create a much better experience for everyone. And you can create more value faster and make sure that this, the ultimate value at the end of the project.
And then spending time on problem framing. So making sure that we understand the problems that we're going to solve before we jump into the solutioning. And solutioning could be just the early prototype. But there's been times that we have the design workshop, we run it for half a day, and we're not fully on the same board that we actually understand the problem. So then we might extend that, maybe bring in additional users to ensure that, all right, this is actually going to make sense. It's going to address these key business problems that we're facing. And then once we understand that, we can jump into the solutioning. But even then, we're just starting with the first iteration of a prototype. It's never straight from problem to actual BI tools. We want to have that prototype throughout the life cycle.
Yeah, so third one, validate early and often. So that means making sure that you're in close contact with end users and make sure you get feedback and you get them to test your ideas and your concepts of the future solutions. And if you have users along on the whole journey and working closely with designers and the full team, that's when you can make sure that you can continuously validate and make sure you're on the right track.
It's kind of the same thing, but highlighting some bits more. Keep the process iterative throughout the project life cycle. So if you're a project manager or managing a team that's working on a project, it's going to be really valuable if you ensure that, first of all, designers are on the project throughout the project life cycle, but also that the end users. So it's not just end users come up to the first workshop and then in the final one. So keep your designers close and keep your end users even closer.
Yeah, so the last one, position design correctly. That's also a really important one. These are all really important. But this one is about making sure that designers are integrated well within your whole team and that you're making sure that they can be part of most initiatives in your organization. And it's about creating a design culture, like having a strategy where you incorporate a culture of design in your company.
Right. So there's some things that we're going to give away. One is the data visualization guide. This is something that we often do with organizations. So we provide them documentation around dashboarding. So this is a document that we're going to send to you guys after this webinar. You'll get a follow-up email with this pack. And this pack will talk about best practices. So it's going to go through the visualization types. we all know that there's so many of these, but it talks about when's it best to use certain types and where they are used. And it goes into fairly detailed view of each one. It also talks about color, because color is super important. If you use color effectively throughout the dashboards, it's going to help the end users to get insights. And also it addresses things like accessibility, ensuring that everyone can get the same information out of the dashboards. And then it also talks about some more designy things. So storytelling with data, how to group elements, what's the perfect hierarchy for something, to ensure that, you know, if your organization has a lot of reports, dashboards, you can kind of start to unify them, that whichever report you're looking at, you instantly can kind of start to read it because things are done in a similar way. So this is kind of just a lean approach. Usually on our engagements, we also create like an extended document that then talks about, it sets the colors that we are going to use in the visualizations. As Anna said, usually there's different requirements for marketing purposes. So even though if your business has already a marketing style guide, usually for dashboarding, we want to have something a bit different to ensure that it's giving the insights easily for all use types. And then another resource that we have created is Playground by Aginic. And it's a curated space filled with creative data solutions. And it's a bit funny because I said filled with, it's not necessarily currently filled yet because we just launched it a while back. So you can access it from playground.aginic.com. And basically this is going to house a lot of demos, demo projects, so related to business intelligence. So currently it has 3 demos. We have a couple utilizing Power BI. There's one coming that uses Elasticsearch. We're also bringing up other platform providers such as Click, ThoughtSpot, and Looker. So feel free to go around. You can read more about the project and then actually jump into the demo. So go into the tools and see how things are done. And that brings us to the Q&A section. So we're keen to hear any kind of questions that this talk has sparked in you. We might bring big guns Hodgie back to the scene.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Pete. That was an awesome presentation. For those on the Zoom call, please just feel free to drop your questions into the chat or into the Q&A section, and we'll pick those up. I might start with one that I just saw on the chat, Anna and Pete, and that was from Vicky, I think, just in relation to feeling a little bit constrained about, I guess, brand colors. Have you got any observations in relation to how you make for really impactful design where you might have a palette that's restricted to certain brand colors?
Yeah, we have encountered that a few times in the past. And what we can do is that we try to incorporate the brand colors, and then we try to add some additional colors that work really well with them and can kind of complement, so but don't take away the full brand. So it could be blacks and grays to start with, but then it could be also other colors that can work alongside but doesn't take away the actual strong brand that they might already have. Sometimes there might be conversations where you try to be a little bit more specific with dashboards, but we usually find a good way where we can make sure that the brand stays intact.
So if the brand has like really strong brand colors, we usually might try to steer them to a bit muted colors. So they still have the same colors, but something that's easier to use in a dashboarding sense. Because if you land on a dashboard that's really strong in color, it's really hard to trying to then kind of steer the user, like what are the key things that they need to see on this dashboard. So if the starting point is that you have these really strong colors, it's hard to then trying to draw the attention to somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think it's a really good point too, because I think we're dealing with that with one of our clients right now, and one of their key sort of corporate brand colors is red, and red obviously signifies, you know, I guess maybe bad, maybe stop, and so we're trying to influence them away from, you know, holding on to that corporate color in terms of integration into some of the key dashboards. So it's a really interesting area.
Yeah, definitely. It is sometimes when it comes to those traffic light colors, red, green, and yellow, it can sometimes be problematic if that's something that's being used on a dashboard, but it's also part of the larger brand. It can be a bit confusing. So we try to steer away from that. And often we try to steer away from the traditional traffic light colors, because that doesn't work that well with colorblind people. So we find other ways to get around that, either with color or with other indicators as icons. And that's usually more efficient.
Just had a question come through from Jason. He was just wondering about how do you integrate design thinking with process redesign, and any observations you guys might have on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. So this taps into the world of service design, and this is what we talked about briefly. It's a broader topic than the 5 minutes that we gave space for that. So keen to talk about that more. But obviously everything is about figuring out, identifying the key touch points, not just external with the external users, but also internal processes where there's friction. So usually they might be outdated data systems that might be causing friction, needing to pull data from different places and then kind of comparing to reports. These are some of the examples. So what we're trying to do with service design is, first of all, identifying these, having those interviews with users. But then what we want to set in place is some kind of monitoring, because we want to understand if the process is actually improving. And there's different ways to monitor, like obviously on the client side, on the customer side of things, you can monitor the success rate of your website, and you can interview them there and ask for validation if they're having a great experience. But you should also have those kind of facilities internally. And these are usually something that we try to then get in place to kind of validate our work. So our work of improving this process is not just based on gut feel either.
Yeah, I think we can probably do a separate talk on that at some point. Yeah. That would be exciting.
Awesome. Guys, I've just got a question, a bit of an observation from my work with you guys in design and implementing some of these things. And the question is, when you're maybe embarking upon this type of approach for the first time, maybe it's something different for the organization to get used to, and maybe you're bringing in very senior people into the room, along with some maybe people that are more in junior roles within the organization, and you're asking them to ideate and contribute. How do you get the balance right to make sure that the most senior voice in the room maybe doesn't constrain creative thinking and everyone is able to contribute effectively?
It's definitely a challenge, and usually, like, we try to phrase these workshops that they're pretty rapid. So for instance, we have a design workshop that runs for 3-4 hours, and if you have a room of 12 to 16 people, there's obviously, you need to get stuff done, but you also want to make sure that everyone has their voice. So we have different techniques for that. One of them is something that we briefly talked about, which is how might we's. So we use a technique to, if you identify a pain point, if you turn that into a question, it sets your mindset to think about creative solutioning for that. But also in these workshops, we just have everyone, we give everyone Post-its and pens so they can then create these how might we's. So even though they might not have the voice or get the chance to say everything that they think about, they can output them on a piece of paper, and we keep that in our design process. So that's one of the ways that we ensure that everyone has the say in the room.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it, Pete, because we collect everything that's written down, and we make sure we write down what people say. And when we do it remotely in Miro, it works really well because it's all collected in one place on one huge whiteboard, digital whiteboard. And we have a few other tricks to make sure we keep it playful, but also very directed and focused, and making sure that we can get as much information out of the workshop that we want to, and make sure that everyone in the room are happy with the direction we're taking. So the how might ways is a good one. Another one that's a pretty good trick, and it's a kind of a neutralizing exercise. And this is something that we call deep sea creatures. You get everyone to draw a deep sea creature on a blue post-it. And then during the workshop, if you feel like someone is going too deep into a topic or being too focused on one area when we need to be more high level, you hold up this blue post-it with your deep sea creature to indicate that maybe you're going a bit too deep now, and you don't have to say anything, you just hold it up. So it's kind of like a nice passive but also playful way to make sure you get everyone back to the topic at hand. And it makes it a bit fun, and you're trying to, I guess, neutralize those moments when maybe seniors are trying to take over the voices in the room.
Yeah, that's excellent. Anna, should we launch the final poll?
Yeah, we should. So we have a final poll for all of you, and we're happy to take questions as I'm launching this one. This can just sit in the background. So this is just a couple of questions, just to ask, to get some feedback from you guys. So it's launched now, so I'll keep it up for the remainder of the session, and we can keep on answering questions.
And again, like if you think about any questions after this session, you can always reach out. So we're keen to address all the questions. Sometimes I find that I start to think something a bit later on. So yeah, feel free to get in touch, send us an email, give us a call, anything. Keen to talk about design.
And just on that as well, you'll all have the opportunity to join Aginic's design community moving forward. So this is our way of sharing experiences, sharing new developments, cool tech that we're using with you all. So feel free to jump in, subscribe to that, and we can stay in touch that way as well.
Awesome. And what's also going to happen next is, this is a bit of a teaser. So we're going to continue these sessions, and the next one will be hosted by two of our rock stars, Rob and Felix. And they're going to be talking about agile delivery. So how does agile delivery work in a data project? So that's penciled in to be on Wednesday, November 4th. And you also get the meeting invite for this one following this session. And as said, please stay connected. So the initial director was Mark, who kicked off this session, Anna and myself, and then David Hodges, one of our final panelists. Feel free to get in touch through LinkedIn or send us an email. We're keen to talk about whether design can bring business benefits inside your company.
Yeah, we've got another question here in the chat.
Awesome.
You mentioned data science in your initial slides. Have you taken up any data science projects with customers? So this might be something for David to talk about. I know it's something that we have, this is included in our business strategy now. I'm not really sure what projects are going. I'm pretty sure there are a few going at the moment.
Yeah, there are. And I guess, design thinking is really important in some of these data science projects, particularly when you're looking at, taking the experiment, if you like, from data science and then applying that and implementing that into the real world, into business as usual. So I can think of one in a healthcare setting where it was basically looking at how could we predict, I guess, demand, for want of a better word, in relation to that health setting. And design was really important for us, because if you think of the health setting, you've got a lot of different user groups in there, clinicians. Within the clinicians, there's different, obviously, specialty groups, all with different needs. And, you know, it's a high-paced environment. So we actually found that design thinking, integrating our designers at the outset, was really important to make sure that we built in that empathy and really understood, I guess, the time pressures, the demands, and the different needs of, say, a doctor versus a triage nurse versus a hospital executive. So yeah, every data science project we do involves design as an integral part.
And also what we do in the design space, one of our offerings is training. So we provide companies with training regarding design thinking, as well as then, for instance, data visualization. So we work closely with engineering teams or analyst teams to kind of ensure that from design perspective, we follow then the best practices, building these dashboards and setting up the reporting as a whole up for success by having these really thought out foundations. So in the follow-up email, there will be also a link to our packaged services. So please have a look and see if there's any kind of benefit that you could get from these for your business.
Yeah, does anyone else have any more questions? You're able to raise your hand, and I can also allow people to talk if anyone wants to have a chat.
It's probably just worth pointing out too, guys, that Aginic does a lot of work with in-house teams that might be taking their first steps into the world of UX and design. And so if that's you, feel free to reach out, because we work very collaboratively with in-house teams all the time.
Yeah, it's been great to see so many people call in. This is our first webinar session, so we're pretty excited about this too. And we're recording this session, so we will send the recording through sometime next week, but you'll already receive an email today with a link to the PDF about the dashboarding best practices and a few other links.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for joining. I hope everyone will have an awesome Friday. And if you're lucky to have the long weekend this week, if not, I know it's going to happen in a couple of weeks. So thanks so much for everyone for joining. And as said, keep in touch, keep connected. Thank you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.